the key was the same. It's weird. How's it going, everybody? Thanks for stopping by. This is our weekly Wednesday night live stream. As often is the case, Brianna is joining. Say hi, Bri.
Hi, guys.
Everyone, we're always happy to have Bri here. She was able to join us tonight. Exciting news that Brianna was just elected to another 3-year term as vice president of Steelworkers Local here in Kingston. We're all very happy for her and excited for her.
I wasn't elected. I was
Look,
acclaimed.
just because no one ran against you doesn't mean you weren't elected. It means you were hyper-elected.
No.
You're like Tom Cotton.
It's actually entirely
You're exactly like Tom Cotton, who was so good no one challenged him, really.
See, I think you're making a joke at my expense right now.
Well, Tom Cotton's a ghoulish Republican senator, but
yeah.
the Democrats didn't run anyone against him in this last election. So you're the Tom Cotton of this show.
That's great.
We're going to call you Bri Cotton.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a super chat from Samantha. Thank you so much.
Yep, so Samantha says, here's to keeping your channel visible, Christo.
Viable, yeah. I mean,
viable.
well, there's been a lot of talk recently about a lot of the politics channels, big and small and in between, seeing a decline in viewership. Kyle Kalinske put out a video at Secular Talk. He's got about 950,000 subs, so, you know, about 20, maybe 17, 18 times bigger than this channel, saying that there's been a decline in viewership and in general a decline in subscriber growth from a lot of these channels. And that might have it's probably a mixture of a declining interest in day-to-day news now that the election is over and things are not nearly as bonkers as they were when Donald Trump was president. But also, I think an effect is the there might be algorithmic changes. YouTube from time to time, whether purposeful or sort of just by happenstance, algorithmic changes happen which promote certain kinds of content and demotivate certain other kinds. Mm-hmm. So that is something that's happening right now. But, you know, a lot of people have said that, you know, there are peaks and valleys. We're going to keep producing the content that everyone loves on this channel. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and well, Leslie with a very generous super chat, which is a samurai fox holding sparklers doing a You're Amazing Sparkler dance. So thank you so much, Leslie. Leslie always digs out the best stickers.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for your support, Leslie. I very much appreciate it. You know, and so, yeah. And Betty's Mush makes a good point, too. You know, it's gradual, and you guys in the U.S. have gotten it quicker than we have, but with more and more people getting vaccinated, mm-hmm. and more places going back to normal, even though in some parts of the U.S. they're doing it too quickly, people are going back to work, and people are going back to school, and people are going back to socializing and whatever. And so, yeah, it makes more sense that, you know, watching YouTube or Netflix or whatever isn't the only thing you have available to do. Mm. So that's certainly something that's going to be increasingly the case. And we're heading into the summer, because even last summer was quiet compared. Like last summer was still quiet compared to the primary season and the core election season, because even during the lockdowns, you know, people probably still spent more time outside, you know, on their porch than they did, you know, during the winter.
Besides, people need a break. That's when they take a break in the summer, right?
Yeah, people need, 100%. Mm-hmm. But there's still a ton to talk about. That's the thing. News hasn't gone away.
Well, and actually,
yeah,
because it's been slower lately, I've been trying to convince Christo to do a special event. You have water all over your face. To do a special event, but he doesn't really want to do it. But here's what I want to do.
It's not that I don't want to do it.
Here's what I want to do. So I want to do like a socialist date night kind of thing with like Christo and I, and we could co-host and take questions, and maybe we could do like some recipes for some drinks or something like that, and I could show you guys like how we, make margaritas or something like that, or like whatever craft
Or
beer I'm into.
as Brie calls them. Well, actually, Brie doesn't call them this, but everyone calls it this on her behalf.
Yeah.
Margaritas, because the secret is more alcohol.
No.
The secret is
no, it's not.
The secret is Brie makes a margarita like you're supposed to, unlike a lot of restaurants who like make it accessible. So like 2 of them and you're done for the night.
Anyway.
Well, 2 of them and you're good. 3 of them and you're out.
Yeah. So anyway, I know there's a Discord and I know I'm not in it.
You've been invited to you don't use Discord.
I don't know what a Discord is, but I know it's a group chat thing.
It's like Slack but fun.
I have Slack at work.
Yeah, it's like Slack but fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
But anyway, so in the Discord, if someone could like launch this idea for me in the Discord and like figure out what you guys want to do, because Christo won't do it unless we put some pressure on him. So
maybe it's something we could do. Well, the secret is more alcohol, Dan. More. But no, I mean like lots of things happening right now. Just one thing I definitely want to talk about is the new podcast, which people have been listening to. If you haven't seen it yet, it is a Canadian podcast that is a weekly show I'm doing with Andy Borkowski, and it's something I want people to check out because if you're a Canadian that wants more CanCon from me, which a lot of people do, this is the place to get it. That link I dropped in the description should give you all the different, whether you're on iTunes, you're on Google or whatever. And for those who maybe want a left-wing take on Canada, and you're like, look, I'm an American, all I get is like the New York Times telling me that Canada is this and that, or Washington Post telling me that it's this and that, or I get, it gets mentioned once a week on CNN. Like, I want to know more about Canada from the left, then this podcast is a great place to do that. So do check it out if you haven't yet. I know a lot of you have, but I just wanted to remind folks. The first thing I want to talk about, as the title indicates, is just the sheer hypocrisy, the sheer evil of the Republican Party and their approach to voting. There is nothing more frustrating to me than how the Republican Party approaches politics. And you guys know me, I criticize the Democrats a lot, but it is a unique thing that I've seen among Western parties, like parties in Western democracies, that have such a hatred of voting. Mm-hmm. The conservatives in Canada, a few years ago tried to make it a little bit harder to vote with IDs, but it was nothing compared to what we're seeing here. Nothing.
Well, and literally you can get someone to vouch for you.
Yeah, exactly, right? So the Republican Party in the United States hates voters. They hate the idea that everyone who wants to vote can get to vote. They hate that. 100%. And so what you're seeing is a party that has taken the gambit. They have 2 options ahead of them. They're at a fork in the road. Remember the DNC where John Kasich literally stood at a fork in the road to try to make a point about like American society. But the Republican Party really is at a fork in the road. And they're like, okay, look, we're a party of white people, particularly white men, but like older white people. And that worked for us for a long time. And it might still work for an election here or there because of all of these things, like, the Senate really benefiting states that have a lot of rural white people, and the Electoral College too. But eventually it's going to catch up to us. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if Texas goes blue or even purple, we're up the creek without a paddle, right? And so Republicans are like, okay, we could, go to the drawing board and look at what we are as a party that we could change to appeal to younger people, to women, and in particular to minorities of all backgrounds, but say African Americans, where they are the weakest. Where could we appeal to these communities? Are there certain social, cultural, economic policies that we could go to, say, black people and say, hey, I know that you voted Democrat since the days of Jim Crow, basically. And we get why. Basically, don't shame them for it. But we're looking to do better. How can we reach out to the African American community? And they're not doing that really. And instead they're like, okay, we're not the problem. The voters are the problem. You know the Seymour Skinner meme? The famous meme from The Simpsons, the classic episode?
The children are wrong.
Yeah, where Skinner is trying to find Bart when Bart is truant. And he's going to all the hangouts, and he goes to like the 4-H club, and of course, like, it's dilapidated and abandoned, and he's like, there's no children at the 4-H club. He's like, have I really lost touch? He's like, no, it's the children who are wrong. And so the Republicans are like, no, it's not that, we try in very deliberately to win 40 to 45% of the electorate and hope we luck into winning like we did in 2016. It's the voters who are at fault. And so what they are trying to do is limit the voting rights of anyone that in aggregate isn't part of their camp. Right? Either limit their ability to vote, or Dan notes in the chat here, I did see that or at least part of the interview with Dan Crenshaw. He's talking about Mehdi Hassan. But Dan Crenshaw has a district. Let me bring up the Dan Crenshaw district. This is another thing. You don't even have to necessarily disenfranchise black people to do this. So look at this. Look at this district map. I'm going to bring it up here. Pop it up here. So this is his map here. And you can see, there we go. You can see it. Look at this. Look at this map, guys. Look at that. That green is his district. Do you guys see that?
It's like the definition of gerrymander.
It's like the definition of gerrymandering. There's two ways to gerrymander: you pack or you crack. And so what you do in a lot of states that have like minority populations is you'll put all of the black voters, or almost all of them, in one district, guaranteeing a Democrat gets elected there.
But only one.
But only one, and the 4 surrounding districts are all Republican. Or you take a black or, say, Hispanic community and you cut them evenly into 4. And so that nowhere do they form a majority population, or nowhere can they pair up with progressive whites.
Or you cut it like a pie going out.
Yeah, or you cut it like a pie going out. Which is sort of what they do here at the start. You can see, this is right here. It's kind of hard to see. This is Houston. This is urban, like you can see it's fairly downtown Houston, and it cuts into the suburbs and then goes well out into the country and then into like the highway area and into, again, some very rural territory. There is no rationale for this district. There's no rationale for it but it being gerrymandering, right? And again, Democrats have gerrymandered too in the past and recently, but Republicans do it much more frequently and much more egregiously. And more typically blue and purple states have electoral commissions like we do in Canada, which is to say that independent bodies, they don't always get it right. They can make mistakes. Maybe they have biases too, but non-partisan professionals who study demography and politics and all these sorts of things will design maps that balance populations and try to keep like-minded communities together, whether it's, a city, or maybe try to not split a neighborhood that has some sort of cohesive value, and balancing all of these things as best they can, right? Sorry, my mouth is very dry today, guys. Sorry about that. But Republicans throw that out the window in states like Texas. And so, the reality is that this is the game they're playing. They have made it very clear. We can't win with turnout being high unless we, one, stop certain people from voting, mostly black people, but not just black people, but mostly black people, given that they are a large voting bloc. They play a key role in some swing states like Georgia, and they are reliably Democrat, especially black women, but even black men. And to the extent that they do vote, make their votes meaningless. Now, you can't gerrymander statewide, because it's a state. You can't gerrymander a Senate election, but you can gerrymander the House, and you can gerrymander the state houses and the state senates, at least for the most part. And so that's like a key factor. And so right now, Republicans are realizing, again, they've done a lot of these things already. This has been Dan Crenshaw's district for at least a little bit, right? So this is not a new thing, but they still lost in 2020, despite all their efforts to stop black people from voting, despite all their efforts to invalidate votes and overweight others through this abomination of a map that I showed you. They still lost.
Well, and Solano says, I'm in Austin. Look what they did to us in Austin and San Antonio. Can you bring up that map?
What are the districts? Solano? Give me the districts, and I can look it up a little bit easier.
Sure.
The district numbers. We could take a look at those too. But the reality is, the next move is to target black Christians. In Georgia, and I want to play this for you. In Georgia, one of the things that was done to increase turnout and accessibility was to give the ability to vote on Sundays in advance. And a lot of communities, not just black communities, white Christian communities, used it as an opportunity to encourage their congregations to vote.
To organize through the church.
Yeah, to organize through the church and through the church's social groups and community groups connected to the church.
To encourage people to vote.
To encourage people to vote, right? And black turnout was up in this election, and I think was especially up in states like Georgia. It was the only reason the Democrats won. They needed high turnout among black voters, and they got it. Probably helped that, it was a rare effort of the Democrats to run a black person in a statewide race, which is rare. The Democrats historically have not done that, especially in non-deep blue states. They'll run a Booker in New Jersey, they'll run a Harris in California because they're deep blue. They've often tried to only run white people in swing states at the statewide level, leaving African Americans to run for Congress. And again, the heavily gerrymandered packed districts, right? Mm-hmm. And so, they're scared of Warnock. They're scared of Stacey Abrams. They're scared of these people. And they're worried that if black people continue to be able to organize, this is going to happen, right? And so, if you look here...
Well, Stimulus Dragon says, we all know how politically connected God is.
That's really good. Okay, so this is the video here. I want to just get it
very much.
Luckily, I've been able to get the volume cranked on some of these clips because I know historically people have been like, it's too quiet. So the volume is good on that. Now, this is Amy Klobuchar. She's the chairwoman of the Voting Rights and Ethics, this committee, and they're talking about voting rights and stuff. And so you're going to hear Cindy Hyde-Smith. She's a red state, I believe, Mississippi senator. And she is going to make an argument about why Sunday voting is bad.
Thank you.
Senator Schumer's question was, he was wondering why on Sundays Georgia would not participate in an electoral process of gathering signatures, of registration and things on Sunday. And I would just like to respond to that. Georgia's a southern state just like Mississippi. I cannot speak for Georgia, but I can speak for Mississippi on why we would never do that on a Sunday or hold an election on a Sunday.
She's like, I can't speak for Georgia, but I'm basically going to go ahead and speak for Georgia.
Hey, you know, this is our currency. This is a dollar bill. This says the United States of America, in God we trust.
They added that like in the 50s.
Yeah.
That's not a new thing.
The pageantry here is like so pathetic.
Yeah, they added it in like the 50s, guys. That's from like the 50s or 40s or whatever. And they added it at a time when people from her state were fighting hard to stop black people from voting. That was at the same time. There's a connection between like the anti-Soviet animus and the anti-civil rights animus of Southern conservatives during the period that they started adding God to everything. In God We Trust was not a founding father claim. It wasn't. That's a new thing, relatively new thing.
Etched in stone in the U.S. Senate chamber is in God we trust. When you swore in all of these witnesses, the last thing you said to them in your instructions was, "So help you God." In God's word in Exodus 20:18, it says, "Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy." So that is my response to Senator Schumer. Thank you, Madam.
So,
and by holy, I'm assuming she means by not letting people vote.
well, yeah, I think what she's saying is politics is like gritty and not holy and secular. And as a result, we need to like keep the day empty of politics. But then she kind of like buries herself a little bit when she's all of a sudden like, well, okay, yeah, we got to keep it holy. But then it's like you're already arguing that politics and religion in the United States are inexorably connected, right? Like they're inexorably connected. You've already made it clear that you're on the money. Like the God's on the money, God's in the buildings, God is referenced on court, like when you're in court or you're giving testimony at the Senate or at a House hearing. Like it's already intertwined. So the idea that, you know, if you can mention God in secular spaces from Monday to Saturday, you couldn't mention the secular issues at all on the day of rest is absurd to me. Is absurd. And of course, she'll never admit that one of the reasons people probably need to vote on Sunday is that many states don't have good enough labor laws that people can take time off work and they work as many jobs as they have to, and maybe Sunday's the only day where they have a little bit of free time and all of these things, right? It's absolutely absurd. Well, and yeah, and I mean, as Solano notes, she says like, or they say, excuse me, you know, the original Sabbath, and she's quoting the Exodus, which is the Old Testament, is Saturday actually, right? Right? It's Saturday. And I believe we actually had an impeachment hearing on that Saturday, right?
Okay, well, I'm going to head out because I have to go to bed.
Okay.
Well, I have to get ready.
Yeah.
But, guys, just reminder, drop Christo reminders in the Discord about why he should do the special event that I suggested earlier. Okay? All right, good night, everyone.
Okay, bye, guys. Or bye, Bree. Everyone say bye to Bree in the chat. And also for folks here, click that like button. When you click the like button and leave a nice little comment about how I am awesome, YouTube likes that and apparently shows the stream to more people. Yeah, Bree's had a bit of a long day today, and so it was great to have her stop by, if only for a little bit. But no, I mean, let's be real about this. A lot of people have noted that it's especially egregious for Republicans in particular to all of a sudden sort of suggest that like the real issue here is that, you know, we have to keep the day holy. Right? Like Republicans will 100% use religion and use those sorts of things to their advantage in politics whenever possible. They will use religion as a way to, say, absolve themselves from certain civil rights complaints. They'll say, yeah, maybe it's discriminatory, but they're doing it because of their beliefs. And so therefore, we have to respect that. right? And so now that black people, that non-white people, non-white conservatives are using churches as centers of potential political organizing, now that they're doing it, now it's an issue, right? And it goes back to this very, very, I don't know, this very fraught history with how the United States has approached religion with regards to the African American people, right? Because like the history here, and a lot of people assume this, but the history here that from the origin of African Americans being brought involuntarily to the shores of the United States, that Christianity was forced upon African Americans. But that's not exactly true. That's not exactly true. And a lot of people are noting here, like the hypocrisy is astounding, because a lot of people are noting, hey, like, you say you believe in the Sabbath because of Exodus, but I'm guaranteeing that all sorts of these people will break many laws, many religious laws found within Exodus and other and other Old Testament books around not eating shellfish, not mixing milk and meat, and all these sorts of things. And so historically, in the earliest days of like the slave system, Christianity was denied in many Western countries, including the United States, to racialized people, because one of the arguments was you couldn't own someone that was a fellow Christian. That was one of the arguments used, that you couldn't do that to another person who believed in Jesus Christ. You couldn't do that. If they had the same religion as you, then like it was against religious law. Right? Right? Simple as that. Simple as that. And so for a long time there were worries, if we allow these conversions to happen, will our ownership over these people be valid? Eventually, however, especially in the United States, it became understood by religious authorities that they wanted to use religion as a justification for these systems of subjugation. So that's where you get all these people interpreting certain segments of the Bible and of religious law and history to basically say, actually, what we're doing to the African American people as a race is not only morally just, but religiously just, right? 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 Simple as that. And so what ended up happening over time is that through a mixture of it being forced on them, but also adopting the religion, African Americans built their own distinct religious culture in the United States, right? And it became essential in many ways to the survival of communities, right? The survival of many communities, in a very literal term, became intertwined with the existence of like black churches, right? Mostly Protestant, not always, but mostly Protestant. And so religion in the United States has always been political. It's not a coincidence that many of the civil rights leaders, not all of them, but many of them have been reverends and pastors. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King. A lot of these people had religious training as well as secular education. Actually, here in Canada, many of the leftist leaders of the CCF, were Christian as well. Many early socialist leaders in Canada were ministers. Tommy Douglas, J.S. Wordsworth, a lot of these people, Stanley Knowles, were all religious men, right? And so you can see, right? You can see it in these sorts of moments, right? You can see in these moments that, like, religion has been for a long time a central organizing force for the American right. Especially since like the 1970s, where evangelical Christianity became much more rigidly associated with like the Republican Party. And then that intensified during the Reagan years and onward, right? Where white evangelicals became unambiguously Republican. Whereas before it wasn't quite so simple, right? It wasn't quite so simple. And now that there's a verifiable instance where allowing black churches to effectively organize people to vote, not even necessarily in a partisan sense, but simply allowing parishioners to help each other vote, now God is angry. Now we have to worry about the mixture of politics and religion. It's infuriating. Absolutely infuriating to me. Right? And like some people are noting, like Antonia notes, like in the United States, the United States has never been a secular society, right? But at the very least, if you're going to acknowledge that politics and religion really aren't separate, then they should be accessible to people in that way, regardless of their background. It shouldn't only be white conservatives that get to utilize the political connections of religion and politics, whereas everyone else, they can't, right? And that's what you're seeing. Again, you're seeing Republicans realize they're increasingly becoming electorally unviable. And as a result, they're not looking to change how they are. They're looking to change who can vote. Vox did a really good video on this a couple years back, where they did an expose on a Republican strategist who was like the Republican Party's gerrymandering wizard. And actually his daughter, when he passed away, she leaked his documents. She leaked his documents to the public, basically, and said, look, people need to know what my father was doing. And his line was that the voters should pick them, that voters don't pick their elector, their politicians. Politicians should pick their voters. See if I can bring that up. So that was who said, what was his name? Let me see. Okay, his name was Thomas Hoffler, or Heffler, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And he passed away a couple years ago. Right? And basically he said, we need to make it so we get to pick our voters. So Republicans have made it clear. That they need to pick their own voters rather than the voters picking them. And that if they can do that, so long as they can do that, things will be fine. Right? So long as they can do that, things will be fine. That's what's happening. That's what's happening here. So let me see if I can pull this up here. This is a quote. This is the quote right here. I'm just going to play the audio because it's not a very long clip. But this is him basically talking.
Of course, redistricting is democracy at work. Redistricting is like an election in reverse. It's a great event. Usually the voters get to pick the politicians. In redistricting, the politicians get to pick the voters.
So, if you could hear that there, he is at a Republican meeting. Right? He is at a... Oh, you can close that. That was an autoplay. That was at a Republican meeting with like Republican senators and Congress people in the room. Hey, Bruce, everyone say hi to Bruce. Say hi, Bruce. Bruce. Everyone say, hey, Bruce. Hope you're having a good day, friend. So yeah, like, and click the like button, folks. Click that like button. Helps bring people to the stream. The reality is, though, what he's saying is the Republican strategy. We pick the voters. We pick the voters.
Very much.
And so this is the Republican move. You're seeing it. You're absolutely seeing it right now, that the Republicans are going into overdrive on this and many other issues.
Joe Biden campaigned on being a quote.
Right? And that's something that's very fascinating to me, because they have made it very clear. Right? They've made it very clear that they cannot win. Now, one thing that's very interesting about this, though, and this is where, again, I'm going to maybe be a little cautiously optimistic, is right here, because Democrats are starting, if only a little bit, to smarten up on voter rights. So we've been having discussions on the channel about voting rights. We've been having these sorts of discussions, right? Where the Democrats are pushing through voter rights legislation in the House, and they've done that, but that in general, they still need to get it through the Senate, right? And this is big right here. This is big right here because it is Angus King, who is like Bernie. He's not like Bernie, he's more of a moderate, but he is an independent from Maine that sits as a Democrat. And he is one of the people that if you're going to get rid or change the filibuster, you need on your side. You need every Democrat to do it, obviously. But he would be one of the people, along with Manchin and Sinema and maybe like Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan, that would get rid of the filibuster or would stop the ability to get rid of it. Right? And so Angus King, though, is saying, he is signaling that for voting rights, he may get rid of the filibuster. And so it says here, Senator Angus King, independent from Maine, but like Bernie, he caucuses with the Democrats. So for in the Senate, he is effectively a Democrat like Bernie. Signaled on Wednesday that he would support changing Senate's rules if Republicans block voting rights legislation. King, who has long been viewed as wary of changing the filibuster. Why did it do that? That's weird.
Senator
laid out his thinking in a Washington Post op-ed, saying he viewed voting rights as a special case. And I don't disagree. I think you could reasonably support the filibuster. You shouldn't. The filibuster is dumb, guys. It's dumb. But you could reasonably support the filibuster. Right? Yeah, and Chris Coons, too. That's a good point. Chris Coons, too. Like, look at the 8 people that voted down the minimum wage, the 8 Democrats. Those in general are going to be the 8, or some of them on different issues will be the 8. And don't forget, guys, we're ripping Kyrsten Sinema again tonight. We are tearing down Kyrsten Sinema again tonight. So get ready for that. That is on my list to talk about this fine March evening. But basically, let me pull this back up. So what he's saying here. Sorry, my screen just kind of weirded out there for a second. I wanted to get fixed. Okay. Okay, so basically, it says here, all-out opposition to reasonable voting rights protections cannot be enabled by the filibuster. If forced to choose between a Senate rule and democracy itself, I know where I will come down. Opponents of the filibuster have long viewed voting rights and sweeping democracy and election reforms as fertile ground for swaying Democratic senators wary of changing the rules. The House passed an elections and ethics reform bill earlier this month, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has pledged that he will give it a vote in the upper chamber. Without changes to the filibuster, it would need 60 votes, something that it could not get with no Republicans currently supporting the legislation. So, this is, I think, an interesting development, because one of the things I've argued, and some people have argued as well, is that a total elimination of the filibuster is unlikely for a whole bunch of reasons. One, a lot of the moderates don't support that. They don't support such a move. Right? They don't support it. And because they don't support it, like, it's not going to happen, right? And so if you want to see that, like, if you want to see that happen, you're not likely going to. You're not likely going to see that. But you might get some exceptions. You might get some exceptions. Right? And this could be one of those exceptions. That people like Angus King and other moderates might say to themselves, look, I do not support full elimination, but I could tolerate a temporary one based on getting rid of the filibuster, based on voting rights. And so this is a big potential move. This is a big move. If they're able to convince people just on a few issues to get rid of the filibuster, you might actually see something get done. And this is crucial, guys. Absolutely crucial. See some new people hopping on. Great to see everybody. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Be sure to click that like button. If you're new to the channel, click subscribe. It helps to grow the channel and get some new people interested in the content. But I'm excited, potentially. Like, I'm actually surprised that, like, the moderate Democrats are even thinking about talking about filibuster reform. It surprises me a little bit. And as Samantha notes here in the chat, other people have noted it, other folks have noted it beyond this. We're not the first to say it. I mean, the filibuster was an essential tool of white supremacy. It was an essential tool of segregation and of Jim Crow. Like, the longest filibuster in American history was by Strom Thurmond to block basic civil rights legislation. Things that today are seen as essential. He did a filibuster to block. And so whether or not you see the full elimination of the filibuster, I doubt it. I think that the fundamental hope is that you get one, filibuster reform, which is to say you make it difficult to use again. Even Manchin has said he's okay with that. So if you want a filibuster, you actually have to get up there and talk for 12 hours. Make the Republicans sweat if they want to use filibusters. And then two, maybe special carve-outs for filibuster. Right? You could make the case that voting rights is absolutely essential, and so you won't carve out anything but that, and you could make that a reasonable argument. Well, that's the thing, Alex, with this. If you carve out things for the filibuster, you don't need 60 votes. You don't. You only need 50% plus one. That would be 50 plus Harris. Or maybe less if you can get a couple Republicans on any particular piece of legislation. Now, the way it works under a true filibuster, not this new way they've been doing it for the last 30 or so years, the way it was when Biden first became a senator, is that the filibuster is there to prevent certain votes, right? It's there to protect debate, excuse me. it does not necessarily mean that you need 60 votes to pass a bill. The way it used to work was that unless you had 60 votes, you could not move immediately to a vote. If you only had 55 votes, then you couldn't cancel the debate, leaving it possible for some other senators to filibuster it. But when the filibuster collapsed, as it often did, because the people had to be talking on the floor and whatnot, once that ended, the filibuster is over, and you go to a vote, and then you only need 50% plus one. To pass a bill in the Senate right now, you still only need 50% plus one. You just need more yays than nays. The problem is to end debate to get to a vote, that's where you need the 60. And so people are like, if you can modify the filibuster or eliminate it in certain circumstances, you can make the Senate a body where the party with the bill that has more votes for it than against it actually gets passed. Right? Right? That's the hope. That's the hope. Right? One thing I want to do, I try to do it when people are here. I want to drop the Discord. For those who haven't yet, do check out the Discord. It's a great place to hang out in between streams. Lots of great discussion. Lots of great stuff. It's also a good place that, if I have a video that I post that, doesn't get notifications or whatnot, it will, I'll be sure to let you know there, manually myself. But that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is Biden running in 2024. Now, this is another piece of reporting from The Hill, and they've come out and said that Biden apparently is considering a 2024 run. Now, this has surprised me a little bit, if I'm being honest, because I honestly didn't expect it. So if I just bring this up here, you can see that he might actually run for 2 terms. And I'd love to know what people think. Did they expect this? Do they think he's actually going to run? Do you think that he's going to have it in him physically, mentally to run? I do want to talk a little bit about this. So the article says here, let me bring that up again. Article says here, Biden campaigned on being a transition president during a pivotal time in the nation's history, saying he'd take the reins from former President Trump and return the country to normal. But now more than ever, those around him say he'll make another bid for the presidency. I don't think there's any reason to say he won't, said one longtime advisor to the president. Another Biden ally added that Biden hasn't told associates he wouldn't be running again, so we all assume that he is, contrary to the sentiment that he'll be a one-term president because of his own volition. Biden, who will turn 79 later this year, is the oldest president in the nation's history. If he runs again in 2024, it will undoubtedly open discussions about his age and ability to do the job. Right? So what do you guys think? Do you think Biden's got it in him? You guys think Biden's got it in him? I'm just gonna get a bit of water. I'll be right back, and I'll take a look at these. All right. A lot of people skeptical about Biden. Biden needs to go. Yeah, he's going to be old, right? He's going to be he'll be in his mid 80s when he finished a second term. Right? I mean, if Biden can run again, then so can Bernie. That's a good sign. If you want Bernie to run again, Biden running again would give Bernie some credence. Although, it's hard. It's rare that a sitting president gets challenged meaningfully in a primary. Whereas, if Harris runs, while I think a lot of Democrats would just automatically support her, she wouldn't be guaranteed a free cakewalk to the nomination. She would have to run for it, likely again, at least against at least some challengers. Got a couple super chats I want to read here. Bose says GOP protects guns for NRA, even for psychos. Love money. I mean, you know, Bose, it's a great point, right? It's a great point that the NRA just worships guns and will legitimately empower people to have them even when it's perhaps unsafe. I mean, one thing I'll say, just to clarify a little bit, and progressives are guilty of this sometimes too, that often people will say, well, people with mental illness, why do they get arms? Why do they get guns? But one of the difficulties with that discourse that we need to push back a little bit on is like people with mental illness are often more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of violence. And so I think sometimes like the discourse around these things sort of hurts like that sort of discourse, right? Like people with mental illness are not all pending, you know, mass shooters or whatever, right? So that's one thing to note. But look, again, we've talked about this in the U.S. The U.S., I mean, like, gun ownership has been highly racialized and politicized. I'm of the mind where I'm not like a gun abolitionist, but I'm not necessarily like a pro-gun lefty like some people are. I think that, for instance, guns like the AR-15 likely don't need to be owned by just regular people. That there's a difference between owning a hunting rifle and owning an assault rifle. You know, things like that. That's one of my viewpoints. Samantha says, end filibuster to pass voting rights in DC statehood. Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you made the point, even just on a very programmatic thing, to go to the moderates and say, look, we get why you support the filibuster. We might not agree, but we get it. But these issues are too important. They are too important to just be quashed. And we can't allow Republicans to basically rig the next 2 or 3 elections and then allow 40 Republicans in the House effectively, because they only need 40 or 41, I guess, 41 Republicans who maybe only represent like a quarter of the population of the states, because the 50 Democrats represent way more people than the 50 Republicans in the Senate. It's not like they're equal. The Democrats represent millions and millions and millions, tens of millions more voters than the 50 Republican senators. And so the fact of the matter is, I think that's a reasonable point. DJ Oaks Monroe says, please talk about the NDP response to the liberal gun ban stuff. It seems like the libs are very unorganized and not thinking things through. I mean, look, the NDP is always in a tricky position with this sort of issue, because you have urban NDP types that are generally skeptical of guns, but then you have some more rural and maybe more blue-collar NDPers that have more of a pro-gun attitude. I think that the party's approach will generally lean towards more control over firearms. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for debate. But again, I think there's a distinction. Like some guns are more dangerous than others. And I don't think assault rifles should just be something you can buy. I just don't. I don't think they should be. I think people should be able to own hunting rifles. I think maybe we could have a discussion, people being able to own basic, handguns. But I don't think the Second Amendment, which does not exist in Canada, we do not have a Second Amendment in Canada. But I don't think the Second Amendment necessarily needs to interpret the right to bear any arm you wish. You have the right to bear arms, keeping in mind that when that was written, you had to put the gunpowder in and tap it down and then take a shot and then do it again. They didn't even have like real semi-automatics back then, really. It was a different time. I mean, look, people are saying about Feinstein, is she going? One thing about Feinstein is that, I mean, I think that she's probably going to be on her way out soon. I don't know if they're going to be able to force her out. One thing Gavin Newsom did, maybe to put pressure on her and take pressure off himself, was promise that if she did resign, she would be replaced by a black woman. Because a lot of people felt that an opportunity was lost to ensure a black woman remained in the Senate. The Senate currently does not have any African-American women because Kamala Harris left the Senate to assume the vice presidency. And so some people felt that her replacement should have kept that representation. Of course, you could make the argument that Alex Padilla, who is a Hispanic man, also represents a key constituency in California. And so I don't necessarily think that was a negative, but maybe that's a hint to Feinstein that you need to go and we'll find someone younger and maybe more diverse to represent this state. Maybe. Yeah, see, that's another thing too. I mean, look, the thing with the Second Amendment is it's already been interpreted broadly, right? As or M. Haxid notes, N. Haxid, or if I'm saying that wrong, let me know, please. As part of a well-regulated militia. I mean, that's in the Second Amendment. In my interpretation, then, you do not have a right to own any guns at all unless you're in a militia, and maybe even then, you shouldn't be able to have the gun until it's given to you in a time of need by your militia captain at the armory. That could be a reasonable interpretation of the Second Amendment. It isn't, though. Courts have agreed, and the Supreme Court has said that the right to bear arms is actually more of a broader, you have the right as an individual to own a gun. But there's no reason why, because it's already been interpreted beyond the direct wording, that you couldn't, for instance, ban certain guns and still uphold the Second Amendment. Yeah, so the argument is the National Guard, but so the argument could be, hypothetically, that only people registered currently in the National Guard should have the right to have a gun, and every other person, every other citizen should not, because they are not in the context of a well-regulated militia. Somebody else also asked a question of is it easier to get rid of the Electoral College than the filibuster? And the answer is almost certainly no. You can't get rid of the Electoral College, but there's a lot you can do to change it, right? There's a lot you can do to change the Electoral College. Tim says, is Kamala Harris still a member of the Senate? Yeah, in a technical sense, she is the president of the Senate. That's fair. But I think that people generally interpret the vice president as separate from the 100 senators. Like, she is a part of the Senate, like Mike Pence was and Biden was. But she's not a senator, even though she plays a functional role in the Senate. CMT says, I wanted Bernie, but I've never believed that Biden has mental problems. I think that Bernie has had a lot of influence on Biden. I mean, look, my view on Biden is that clearly, and Donald Trump too, but not Bernie Sanders, there are signs of aging-related effects. That's my view. I do believe that. And you can look at both Biden and Trump back in 2016 and then listen to them in 2020, and both of them sounded different. There was decline there. Now, that's not necessarily saying that Biden's decline is so severe he's unable to do the job. And it's not me saying that Biden is more unfit than Trump. Although, as I noted in the last election, when Americans were polled, they found both Biden and Trump unfit for office. They did not think either was really fit for office. Now, they felt Biden was more fit than Trump, but not by a whole lot. Right? So, I think there are a lot of people who have concerns about Biden's health and his ability to do the job. Maybe not for the next 3 years, but for more than that. Right? So people are asking, somebody asked about the Electoral College. And I do agree with you, CMT, that I do think Bernie is having more of an influence than maybe a lot of us expected. And, I'm pleasantly surprised that such is the case, right? That he actually does seem to be having a bit of an effect right now. And that's really good to see. That's really good to see, because I was not necessarily expecting that. CMT says, I believe that Biden cares about the future of the younger generation and has been leading towards the progressive agenda. I would support Biden. I mean, look, Biden has, at least in his rhetoric, been much better with young people. I made a video all the way back during the primaries where Biden basically said the young people need to just toughen up. He basically said this young generation, millennials, they don't get it. They don't work hard enough. They're not changing things like my generation did. They are whiny babies, and I don't feel sorry for them. I don't have sympathy for millennials. Biden said that like around the time the primaries were starting, or maybe he said it in 2018, but like that was in the last 4 years he said that, basically. So I think a lot of people, right? A lot of people are right to still be skeptical of Biden's ultimate commitment to young people. Nonetheless, I mean, has he been better than I expect? Yeah, but don't forget, Biden has right now the ability to cancel student loans. Right? Like, look, we get it. Like, look, you don't want to always give like the moderate Democrats the Republican boogeyman, because it sort of lets them off the hook too easy. But we have to be fair. Like, the Republican Party is truly horrendous, right? And they are making it harder for progressives to get things done. But Biden has the power to cancel student loan debt. No scholar, no expert I've seen has made the argument that Biden doesn't have within his executive pen. He just needs to sign it. It's only him. He can abolish student loan debt. Maybe not all of it, maybe just some of it. The federal government's student debt holdings, he can get rid of it. Right? He can get rid of it. So Biden not doing that is a bit of a blotch on his record vis-a-vis younger people. And of course, I know not all student debt holders are young people. I know that. I know that there are people who have had debt for a long time and there's mature students, but disproportionately, student debt is a younger person's issue. And so if Biden wanted to help the younger generation out, he could tonight. He could be watching this. President Biden could be with Jill at home. They're getting ready for bed or whatever. He's like, we're going to put on Christo Aivalis, see what he's saying about me this week. And my rousing speech could convince him. And he could say, you know what? This Canadian kid knows what he's talking about. Makes a good point. Jill, I'm going to cancel $50,000 of student loan debt for every student loan debt holder, or $20,000, or whatever he actually ends up doing. Right? Like, I don't know. I think that he could do that. And that he hasn't is a limitation. Other people are noting Biden's approach to firing some staffers for marijuana use. Again, that's not strictly just a younger person's issue, of course, but it is something that maybe disproportionately affects younger people, and younger Democrats, younger people are more likely to support more freedom around things like marijuana use and things like that. And so I would say that Biden has been better than I expected, but he still fundamentally, I don't think, is fighting for young people like Bernie would have fought for young people. Or maybe even like a Warren, who I think would have also canceled student loan debt. I believe that. It's just, that's something to consider. Sir Fappington says, how do you feel about the idea of abolishing the FBI and the CIA? I mean, that's an interesting question. We've often focused more on like abolish ICE, right? Like abolish ICE, which I think is like a much easier one, because I think there's broad progressive agreement on it that ICE needs to go, right? ICE needs to go. It is undeniably a force that like targets vulnerable people. It's based on systems of racism and all sorts of hatred. Like, ICE needs to go. 100% ICE needs to go. Right? 100%. But it's the reality is the FBI and the CIA, I'm not quite as sure. One thing I will say is that I think it would be easier to abolish the CIA. The CIA is just like a force of absolute evil, right? And so I think that would be a lot easier. The FBI plays a bit of a different role, though. I mean, you sort of do need the FBI in some ways, or at least an organization like it, because as long as federal crime exists, you need certain organizations to investigate it. And so whether it's related to, any kind of thing that crosses national or international borders, you need a federal policing force insofar as you're going to have police to investigate things. So you don't have to rely on always having states cooperate effectively, right? If somebody is doing something illegally across borders, you want a federal force to be able to police that. And the FBI plays that role. So I would say abolish ICE, abolish the CIA, but I'm not sure about the FBI as much, personally. CMT follows up by saying, I think now that Biden is in, he will be a surprise to most people. He wants to prove that his views have changed. I think we've seen some of that, CMT. We've seen some of that. Like, for instance, one thing I will agree with you on there is that Biden has, for example, come out and said, come out stronger than a lot of us expected on stimulus. That if we go back to the days of, Obama and Biden in the White House, if we go back to the days of Obama and Biden in the White House back in 2008, 2009, they sort of made it very clear that it was all about bipartisanship. They wanted the stimulus deal to be bipartisan. They won this hyper majority. They won a huge victory, Biden and Obama, and they won huge victories in the House and in the Senate. Massive victories. And yet when push came to shove, they obsessed. They absolutely obsessed over getting bipartisan support. Right? They failed on that. They went too small, and they didn't, just keep it simple and give money to the working class. And the Republicans didn't get punished, but they did. The Republicans still thought it was socialism, but didn't blame their own people for supporting it a little bit. And a lot of Democrats, and I'm not blaming them, were like, Obama and Biden screwed me, and they lied to me, and so I'm not necessarily going to go out and vote for them in the 2010 midterms. And then Obama lost the House and never really had the opportunity again to pass big legislation because he lost the House. Right? And for all the folks joining, click the like button. If you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button. Always love to have new people join the conversation. If you are new to the channel, let us know in the chat. Everyone's super welcoming. This time, though, Biden has said, Biden this time made it clear that, look, we'll try to get Republicans to vote for this, but if they don't, they don't. If Republicans don't vote for it, there's only so much I can do. Right? There's only so much I can do. And so he said, we'll go without them. We'll go without them. And the stimulus package, again, it did not include the minimum wage. And it did not include the $1,400 check should have been $2,000. I think most of us will agree that it's not necessarily fair to count the $600 from December in the $2,000 with the 14 to make two, especially this time since you changed some of the eligibility rules, taking the checks away from at least a few people here and there. A few million people, really about 17 million people, didn't get checks this time that did last time because of the change in eligibility. So it's not perfect, but it is a sign that he is more willing to push a little bit of boundaries than Obama. Now, again, he has powers that he isn't using. He hasn't abolished student loans. And he has not come out and publicly criticized corporate Dems who have blocked things like the minimum wage. Right? And I think that that's a problem. Because the minimum wage is not just something that Bernie and the progressives support. The minimum wage is party policy. The $15 minimum wage is mainstream Democratic Party policy. It is not, something just out of the ordinary, right? It is not just something that Bernie Sanders sort of brought out of nowhere. It is Democratic Party policy, right? And I think that that's something that he needs to hammer home, because if he doesn't, then he's sort of abandoning his own policy. Right? Biden ran on that. That's his. That is his policy. So he needs to defend it. He needs to defend it. So, that's certainly something to know. People are saying, would it be easier to get some of these things done to abolish the Electoral College? I mean, we've talked about it before. Abolishing the Electoral College is super hard. It's not going to happen. It requires a constitutional reform, which means you have to get, well over half the states, including a lot of the states that like the Electoral College, because as small states, it benefits them. You're not going to get rid of it. What you might get is the national popular vote interstate compact, which is basically if enough states to add up to 270 electoral college votes just agree together to give their electoral college votes not to the winner of their own state, but to the winner of the national popular vote, then in effect, you've abolished the Electoral College. That is possible. So hypothetically, if you get together enough states that they add up to 285 electoral college votes, then whether or not the electoral college exists, states have the unilateral authority to determine how they allocate their electoral college votes. Now, most states, most of them, do a very simple, the winner of our state, whether they win by 1 vote or 10 million votes, gets all of the electoral college votes from our state. And some other states do it where they have there's a statewide winner, and if you can win one of the congressional districts, you get that delegate. But for the most part, most states are winner take all. There is nothing to stop states from saying whoever wins the most votes nationally gets our state's votes, even if that means our state voted for the loser nationally. That's possible. That's possible. You need enough states to get to agree to that, though, to get to that compact. They're not there yet. But hypothetically, if you could get enough blue and purple states to agree to that, and they had enough college votes to get over the hump on their own, then the national popular vote effectively becomes the de facto metric to get a majority in the electoral college. Right? That's plausible. And that does not require any constitutional reform. So you don't need to worry about getting 35 states or 30 states or whatever it is to sign on to it. Okay, now, speaking of the minimum wage, our good friend Kyrsten Sinema is back in the news a little bit. I want to talk a bit about this. So we all remember Sinema from a couple weeks ago now, when during the minimum wage debate, during the stimulus package, she came out and basically said that she voted against the inclusion of it. And as we remember, she did this sort of little dance, right, where she was kind of like, she pranced up to the center of the Senate floor and sort of did a little like that kind of thing and sort of like pranced off, like she was like jokingly voting to take a minimum wage increase from tens of millions of hardworking people, right? That she was doing this to take the votes away from tens of millions of hardworking people. And the thing with Sinema is she very much likes to portray herself as a progressive and as somebody that understands like equality when it suits her. She is one of the very few people out in U.S. government. She is openly bisexual, right? She's a proud supporter of a lot of social justice-based issues, at least on paper. But when it came to the minimum wage, she was against it. Right? When it came to the minimum wage, she had to do her little dance. Right? She had to do her little dance and had to like make it all like cute and quirky like Sinema is, and she'd be like, ha, fuck poor people. Like, and it was like the most insufferable thing. And so today, and this is not me belittling the day, but today is Equal Pay Day in the United States and in many countries as well. It's a day to acknowledge the fact that women, I believe the metric is, women would have had to work all of 2020 and until now in 2021 to earn what a man would have earned in 2020. And so it's a way of showing in some ways how long women have to work to earn what a man would earn. Again, on average. Of course, we know some women make more than men, some men and women make the same amount. We know this, but like, again, on aggregate. And pay inequality is important, and I support equal pay legislation, personally. But look at what Cinema is saying here. Arizona women make 84 cents for every $1 men make. On hashtag Equal Pay Day, we're proud to support the Paycheck Fairness Act because Arizona women deserve equal pay for equal work. But again, like, we can't ignore the fact that she opposes a minimum wage increase. She voted against the minimum wage increase. And I mean, I've harped on this, and I know a lot of other people have as well, but the minimum wage increase is a feminist issue. The minimum wage increase is an issue of gender justice. Well, Samantha Sider says, how much would that minimum wage increase have helped working class women across the country? And the answer is quite a bit. I mean, even if you just look at the replies to her, people note this, right? Like, people were on this. Right? Like this tweet here. I bet the women who comprise 2/3 of minimum wage workforces would have appreciated your vote, Rainbow Bright. And he called her Rainbow Bright because she is, well known for wearing these ridiculous outfits, which she's like, it's part of her image of being like progressive and quirky, and she doesn't dress like a real senator. Here's again the famous GIF. You guys can see it here of her, doing her vote. Somebody mocks up her thing here where the person is drowning. But there was a good infographic, and this is an infographic that's from a few years ago, so it's not necessarily fully up to date. But this is important because what this shows is like the misinformation and the poorly conceived notions of about who makes minimum wage, right? And like why that matters. So let me see if I can blow this up a little bit so people can see it. Let me. Yeah. Okay. So you can see here when you ask people, and there are people in the comments defending her with this sort of narrative. It says, "Who benefits from a higher minimum wage?" People think that the minimum wage is only for like a teenager. They maybe work 10, 15 hours a week after school or on weekends. They live with mommy and daddy, so they don't have, rent or mortgages or basic expenses. They don't pay for their own food. And they're earning it for extra spending cash to buy a new video game or whatever. And so that argument is often used against young people against the minimum wage increase to say, these people don't need it. And so you're just giving wage increases to people who don't need it. And one, that's bullshit. And I don't care if that was accurate. Young people should still work for a decent wage. And $15 in 2025 is already the goddamn compromise. So even if it was just teenagers making this sort of money, I would say, fine, I don't care. They still deserve it, right? That would be my argument. But this is who it is. This is who it is. The average minimum wage worker, again, this was in data, I think in 20, I'm not sure when this data is from, but it's fairly recent. They're 35. The average minimum wage worker is an adult, older than I am. I'm turning 34 in like 4 days. So older than I am, about my age, the average minimum wage worker. 90% of them are above 20, which is to say the average is 35, but only 10% of them are teenagers. And less than that would be like real teenagers. Because if you're 18 or 19, you might be living on your own. You might not be living at home. You might be a student, but you're still paying for rent at university or what have you, or your dorm room. So you have adult expenses at 18 and 19. 59% are women. So not quite 2/3. Not quite 2/3, but about 60%, a super majority of minimum wage earners or people who earn below 15 are women. And most of them work full-time, 54%, and I'm guessing a lot of them don't work full-time not because they need a part-time job only, but because most low-paid jobs are part-time jobs. And finally, essential and frontline workers make up a majority of those who would benefit. Because while a lot of essential workers are like nurses and doctors and what have you, many of them, work in grocery stores and in other essential places that couldn't close down, while many of us were fortunate to stay home, and many of us who earn more money than the minimum wage currently is. So you can see, and this doesn't note it here, but it implies it with the picture. It implies it with the picture. And Jason Kennedy, thank you so much for the Black Cat support. As usual, again, always very much appreciated. As we've noted, the minimum wage, right? The minimum wage would benefit women of color in particular. Like it benefits everyone, because like there are white men who make below $15 an hour. It is a policy that would benefit every demographic, but some more than others. And women of color in particular, Black and Hispanic women in particular, are vastly underpaid. And the work they do is undervalued. And so if you want to say, I'm a feminist, I'm an intersectional feminist, and I bet you, if you ask Kirsten Sinema, she would say, yes, I am an intersectional feminist. You cannot oppose a $15 minimum wage. A higher minimum wage is one of the most instantly feminist policies you could implement. That isn't to say that it's the only feminist policy, of course. It isn't to say that if you raise women's wages, sexism will instantly disappear. Misogyny will instantly disappear. It won't. These issues will go on even if women do achieve more economic equality. But the fundamental reality is that, like, look, if women can find some measure of economic security, if they can find more equality, if a minimum wage increase benefits women more than men, this lowers the wage gap. I wouldn't say come to Canada for this, because there's only one province in Canada right now that currently has a $15 minimum wage, and one other that's moving towards it. Canada doesn't have a $15 minimum wage yet. Not most of Canada. And in general, we don't have our minimum wages are higher. Like the lowest minimum wage of Canada, I think, is 11 something. But the Canadian dollar doesn't go as far. And I think, Jessica, you were saying, I don't think any of the states still paid the $7.50 minimum wage. That's not quite true. If you look, let me see if I can bring this up. So let me pop this over to the other one here. Let me close this one. Okay, so take a look at this. This shows the state of the minimum wage in the various U.S. states, right? The death penalty should be abolished. We'll talk a little bit about that later, too. Like, so this is the minimum wage here by state. And you could see here that basically if a state doesn't have a minimum wage, or it's lower than the federal minimum wage, the state defaults to the federal minimum wage. And so basically all these states in green, right, or in yellow or in red do not have a federally mandated minimum wage, or do not have a minimum wage higher than the federal $7.25, or they have one lower. Now, the federal minimum wage of $7.25 supersedes these. So in Montana, for instance, their minimum wage is only $4 an hour, but people don't make that, right? And so basically, anywhere you see green or yellow or orange, they make the base minimum wage. So that includes, for instance, New Hampshire. That includes states like Pennsylvania. That includes states like Virginia. So it's not even all deep, like, blue or red states. Even some swing states and some states that are seen as democratic. Bose Einstein hanging out for the night. Everyone say bye to Bose. Thank you for your support, Bose. Have a good one. So basically, guys, like, there are many states, still very many, that pay that minimum wage. That if the federal government doesn't pass a minimum wage, it's unlikely that these states are going to raise it. And so, yeah, and as some people notes, like Anmar says, some people are moving to that minimum wage, and that list might not include that. It's what the minimum wage is this year. It might not necessarily mean that they're there yet. It might mean that they get there in 2, 3, 4, however many years. But that's what people make now. Jessica Mai with the thumbs up fox wearing a nice cute little shirt saying good job. Thank you for the support, Jessica. And Ariana, thank you so much. She says, I love your video. Thank you. Ariana, thank you for the support as well. Again, I very much appreciate it. Thank you so very much. On that, somebody brought up the death penalty or something. I did want to bring up some good news because we don't always get good news. Where is that? I had that here somewhere. But let me see. Where is that? Let me see if I can find it. So Virginia has abolished the death penalty, right? So Virginia is historically considered part of the South, right? Like culturally, Virginia is the South. I don't know if people in Virginia, do you guys still see it that way? But I do know that historically, Virginia is a southern state. And so in general, the death penalty has been more popular in the South than in the North and in like the West even. And so on Wednesday, this is a big deal. On Wednesday, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam signed a bill into law abolishing the death penalty in the state after the Democratic-controlled legislature passed the measure late last month. It is the moral thing to do to end the death penalty in the Commonwealth of Virginia, right? And they did the signing in the place where they do a lot of the executions, which I think is a very fitting piece of symbolism, if I'm being honest. And I think that's very neat. And I think that's very cool to see. But basically, in essence, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. It's a huge deal. Like, it's massive. Virginia is the first state in what was the Confederacy to stop using the punishment. The Commonwealth has, and this is crucial. I know it's one of the older states, so that's one of the reasons. But no state has killed more people through like execution than this state. Going back to the olden days of 1608, right? Like the earliest days of British colonialism in the United States. No state has executed more people than Virginia. Not even Texas. I know Texas is newer, but not even Texas. So this is a big deal historically. This is a former Confederate, very conservative state that has abolished the death penalty. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I think it's important because there are a bunch of reasons to do it. There are moral reasons, there are political reasons. It's crucial. I am a 100% believer in universal abolition of the death penalty. No exceptions, no at all. At all. For no one. That's my belief. The death penalty is unjust. And that's beyond the fact that, as this article notes, there's been historic and contemporary discrepancies, particularly in that people of color and black people are more likely to get the death penalty than white people, that people have likely been executed or have certainly been on death row while being innocent. And so that I think this is just. I think this is good. Shark, are you really implying that Biden got robbed, that Trump got robbed in Virginia? Are you going to tell me that a state that Biden won by almost a very clear for some, what is that? My brain's a little fried tonight. A clear 4.5 points. Are you telling me? Yeah, that's ridiculous. We're not tolerating election conspiracies here. Trump lost, deal with it. You can be sad about it. Trump lost. And he lost bigly. There should be no death penalty. There should be no death penalty for anyone. Not the Boston bomber, not anyone. No death penalty. Ever. For any reason ever. Ever. I don't care if Hitler was captured alive. No death penalty for Hitler. That is an absolute for me. No death penalty. It's non-negotiable in a civilized society. I think that's my view, and I just think it's a piece of good news. We often don't talk a lot about good news, just in general, but on my YouTube channel sometimes we focus on what's bad in the world because there's a lot of bad in the world, and we should be angry and we should be aware. But there are good news, there are pieces of good news. And this was a victory of the Black Lives Matter movement, of the left, of the black community in general, of civil rights advocates. This is a big deal. It's a big deal. And so I think that's important. Now, one thing to get angry about is how Fox is talking about migrants. Right? We're really getting a sense for this. I wanted to play you a clip here of this because it really shows how ugly it is. This is a clip from Fox News. Basically attacking migrants. And listen to the language they use because this is crucial. it's not just that they are attacking migrant peoples. It's that they are using a deeply hateful language while doing so. And you can see here that, like, there's a fundamental dehumanization. No, you're right, though, Ida. You're right that actually it was a lot closer than, it was a lot closer than it should have been given the Electoral College. But the magnitude of his victory was the same as Trump's in the Electoral College 4 years prior, which Trump admittedly called a landslide. So listen to this. This is Judge Janine, aka Judge Box of Wine. Look at how they talk about and lie about the people coming from the border.
So when you were down there and you were talking to the sheriffs, I
Let me
get
grab
the
some
sense
water.
that
I'll be right
they're
back.
there to do their jobs. They're not there as partisans, but that's just me. I know that I think some Democrats think the sheriffs are just purely partisan, but you talked to them. What'd you hear?
No, you know, partisan has nothing to do with it. This sheriff and all the sheriffs I spoke to and the prosecutors that I spoke to, as well as the individual landowners, it's not about politics, Dana, and it's not about, you know, saying that the border is closed or not closed. I'm telling you for a fact the border is open. And
The border is not open. The border is not open. Like, look, you might not be able to police the entirety of the U.S.-Mexico border, but the border's not open. The United States has not built an anarcho-socialist borderless paradise. It's not an ANCOM commune, right? The United States very much still has borders. So listen to this disinformation. Also, yeah, for those folks in Virginia, shout out to Lee Carter, who is awesome. And I believe he is running for governor, isn't he, Anmar? I think he's running for governor.
stood there with a sheriff who showed me where they stopped the wall, where they are literally from Mexico cutting the bottom of the wall and allowing people to come in.
That's not an open border, Judge Janine. She's admitting that they're cutting through the border. And just because there's not a fence does not mean it's an open border. Who here lives close to the US-Canada border? Depending on where you live on the US-Canada border, not everywhere, there is no fence. In fact, there's a border stop, I believe somewhere in Michigan, where there's a phone and you have to, on the honor system, call and be like, hey, I'm going into the US. Can I come in, please? And they're like, okay. And you go in. Just because there's no fence or because people have somehow gotten around the barrier does not mean the border is open. By that definition, the border was open under Donald Trump for the entire 4 years.
Let's not kid each other. This isn't some asylum-seeking group, all of them for sure. What we've got now is a cartel who is in the business of bringing young children 2,000 miles, where those children are being abused, they're being molested, and even Juan said...
This is Q shit, right? You could see what she's doing here. She's tapping into the Q thing, right? Because Q is all about, we got to protect the kids. We got to protect the kids. We got to protect the kids. And lo and behold, Republicans never really care that much about actual protecting of children. They don't really, but it serves the narrative. So it's like child smuggling. And then, of course, the solution for them is to not let the children in. When it's if these children really were that big of a victims, you should at all costs protect the children.
But 20% of them don't even have family members here. And then I spoke to a woman who owns a newspaper who said to me, these kids aren't even being fingerprinted. They're not taking DNA from them. We're not giving them to the right organizations. People are just showing up and taking kids. In addition to that, the cartels have people inside the United States where they're using social media for the young men that are being brought in to get these young men from these countries to ease the facilitation of drug cartels and the movement of drugs. So in addition to child sexual assault, human trafficking, drug cartels, and we're not talking about marijuana anymore, we're talking about fentanyl and we're talking about heroin.
They still bring in marijuana in part because the United States refuses to fully legalize marijuana.
This is a total disaster. There is no...
Sorry, Jason, if I have to hear this, you all have to hear it.
...border. There is no wall. We are...
She just fucking said that they're cutting through the barriers.
A sovereign nation. We have a right to be a sovereign nation and decide who comes into this country. And anyone who thinks that we're just a globalist landing point is out of their mind. We're spending $86 million for 1,200 families to get them hotel rooms while we've got 10 million Americans out of work.
See, that's another thing with these fucking conservatives. You will always hear this from goddamn conservatives, and sometimes liberals too, but mostly conservatives, where they will say, why are we taking in these refugees? Why are we taking in these immigrants? Why are we taking in these undocumented people when we aren't taking care of our own? They will always say that. We're not taking care of our own because we're taking care of the other. They do this everywhere. They do it in Canada. They do it in Britain. I'm assuming they do it everywhere. They do it everywhere. But then we all know that, like, there's no way in hell Judge Janine or Fox News would actually support any policy to actually take care of those people. Right? Like, she wouldn't do it. And so, like, one, the United States and Canada and Britain and all these societies are wealthy enough that they can take care of refugees and take care of their own working class, the elderly, veterans, whatever. A society as wealthy as the United States does not need to choose. Like Bruce says here, it's like, look, on the one hand, Republicans will say that, and then when a poor person says, I can't find work and I need help, they'll say that they just need to pull up their bootstraps. You know? Well, exactly. SDC says, one doesn't prevent the other. You can do both, but they want to do neither. Right?
We've got 10 million Americans who are going to be competing with people for jobs. It's not about politics. When that sheriff said to me, Janine, this is modern day slavery. The bringing of these children into this country where they will be forever connected to a cartel is slavery. What we're doing here is we are promoting a lower level.
Then why don't you, like, make them citizens, Janine? Why don't you say that if you're like if you're that worried about the children, make them citizens.
Of human being who will be...
Did you hear? A lower level of human being. Now, charitably, you could interpret that as, if we're not careful, it's going to create like an underclass of people that will be harmed, and I'm worried about them. But I think that more accurately, she's doing a sort of Trumpian, they're not sending their best. And we're getting this sort of like Untermensch, this underclass of people. Right? Again, these people do not care about the working class. They don't. They don't care.
Controlled from other countries. So stop trying to make this about this is not who we are. This is about crime coming into this country, and it's a reality, and we're losing.
So that's Judge Box of Wine, Judge Janine, and like, look, you could hear that. Like, their Q stuff is in there. 100%. She's doing this sort of, we're not taking care of our own when we should be. which, just serves to her narrative because, again, Fox in no way intends to take care of their own, they do not intend to take care of their own. And so it's all part of this like ridiculous conspiracy. Like John Bartlett says here, we have a super chat from John. He says, they treat migrants like crap and tell us we need to focus on our people, but don't care about the people when they need help. John, he tweeted that, or he sent that super chat before I mentioned it. I hadn't gotten to see it, but that John and I are on the same wavelength tonight, maybe even more than usual, because that's 100% accurate. It's 100% accurate. They will use kind of loose progressive or social justice rhetoric to sort of defend the prioritization of the people here, but never acknowledge that there's more than enough money to address both issues in a society as wealthy as the U.S. Never enough. Another thing I wanted to talk about here was Sidney Powell. Now, this is really interesting, I think, because the story traverses a couple nights. So yesterday, I put out a video yesterday morning. You might have caught it. If you haven't caught it yet, just go check it out, because I think it's a pretty good vid. So if you remember Sidney Powell, she's the Kraken lady, right? She was the lady that was one of Donald Trump's lawyers during the election or after the election who made the argument that, the voting machines and all these sorts of things proved that that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him. Specifically, that Dominion, the voting company Dominion, was put an algorithm to cheat the system, to cheat the game. And their algorithm broke because Trump got so many votes. He won so massively that it broke the algorithm, which is why they had to do all these quote-unquote late-night adjustments, which were really just mail-in votes coming in and mail-in votes being disproportionately Democrat in most of the country, narrowing the results in certain states like, say, Michigan, where Trump had an early lead that quickly became a Biden lead as the mail-in votes came in and as counting in urban areas, which usually takes longer, started to be tabulated, right? None of this is out of the ordinary. None of it is. All of this was projected by analysts who said, look, a state like Ohio, Biden will go out to an early lead and likely lose it. In a state like Michigan, Trump will go out to an early lead, and if he's having a bad night, if he's going to lose the election, he's likely going to slip away in Michigan as the hours and the days roll by, and that's what happened, right? That's the reality. So Sidney Powell made all these arguments. She made all of these points and then got sued. Right? And she is one of the people, along with Rudy Giuliani and Lou Dobbs and I believe Maria Bartiromo and some other people like Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, that all got sued, I think, in separate $1.3 billion lawsuits by Dominion. And so, in court yesterday, or at the very least in her legal documents, she tried to imply, basically, that actually you can't sue me because my arguments were so ridiculous, no reasonable person would believe me. Basically using the sort of defense which is like, I am so ridiculous, my arguments are so ridiculous that no one should believe me. I'll just read you this segment here. It says, the statements as issue are protected and not actionable. So one, she's trying to make a First Amendment claim, which is that she was expressing her First Amendment rights when she was just fucking lying, right? As a lawyer and as, for part of it, officially employed by the Trump legal team. It says here, determining whether a statement is protected involves a two-step inquiry. Is the statement which can be proved true or false? And would reasonable people conclude that the statement is one of fact in light of its phrasing, context, and the circumstances surrounding its publication? And they cite some things here, and they say this inquiry is determined as a matter of law. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to read out all of this legalese here. It says, analyzed under these factors, and even assuming arguendo that each of the statements alleged in the complaint could be proved true or false, no reasonable person would conclude that the statements were truly statements of fact. And again, I covered this yesterday. What they're saying, yes, Joseph Mangano, we'll get to that. And again, people check out here, let me drop that maybe I'll drop that video from yesterday on this. But yes, that is in a sense the not so much the Alex Jones argument as much, but that one was very specifically about him playing a character. It was more like the Tucker Carlson defense, where Tucker Carlson was not playing a character, but was purposely hyperbolizing, and he was doing so in a very deliberate way that no one reasonable would believe him. And so therefore, he's not lying, he's not slandering, he's not libeling. He's sort of, telling the truth in a way that isn't literal. In a sense, the argument. That's what she's trying to do here. Now, I don't think it's going to work. I don't think it's going to work for a couple reasons. One, whether we think he's a journalist or not, Tucker Carlson works as like a TV pundit. He is at least journalism adjacent. And so in general, people like him, and rightfully so, even if I disagree with him, their First Amendment rights should be defined pretty broadly. You don't want very many cases of journalists being oppressed by people with state power over libel and slander and things like that. So journalists need a pretty broadly defined First Amendment right. But Sidney Powell isn't a journalist, she's a lawyer, and she was working with a particular client and speaking in her capacity as a lawyer, not just as some lady, but as a legal professional. And I think therefore she bears or should bear more responsibility. Oh yeah, I mean, I would love to know if she actually got paid by Trump. I would love to know that. I think she got a ton of donations though. So what happened basically is, she was on the team with Jenna Ellis and Rudy Giuliani and all that, and then went too far with some of her claims and was basically asked to leave the team, like fired or whatever. And then sort of kept doing what she was doing, but on her own with like Lynn Wood and other like pro-Trump lawyers who were not working with the Trump campaign anymore, at least officially, although they still were meeting with Trump. They were meeting with Trump after all of this happened. And she was getting donations, I think, from Trump supporters to fund her legal efforts to sort of, as a separate legal entity, challenge the results of the election. But this is what's interesting. So this is from Parler. I think Parler's back now. This is from like a right-wing social media thing where Sidney Powell is pushing back on the narrative from her document. Because as soon as that narrative broke, she started to get heat from conservatives who felt that she was selling them out. Right? Because now the argument was Sidney Powell is saying no reasonable person would believe what I said, which is kind of throwing real shade at conservatives because millions of Trump supporters did believe what she said. There's a reason why Sidney Powell became briefly famous and very famous. Right? She became super famous because people believe what she said. And so I want to read you this. This is her statement that she says. It says, response to the fake news attacks on Sidney Powell. So apparently, myself and everyone else who read that document is willfully misinterpreting or misrepresenting what's in it. And it says here, the defamation lawsuit is yet another attempt to silence critics and citizens who want to investigate voter fraud. So this first paragraph here says that Dominion is the claims against Dominion are actually First Amendment speech rights, and they're not specific instances of libel. And it says the fake news media and their allies are spinning meritless claims because their arguments have neither the facts nor the law needed to hold up in a courtroom. That's bullshit. Trump lost all but one of his legal cases, and the only one he did win was to allow scrutineers to get slightly closer to the counting. Like, they won that, but that was it. And the Supreme Court never sided with Trump in any of his cases, and I do not believe they even heard one of Donald Trump's cases. That to get a hearing at the Supreme Court, 4 of the 9 judges need to agree, and they could never get even 4 of the 6 conservatives to agree to hear a case on Trump. By Trump or on Trump's behalf. Certainly, if the cases were even somewhat decent, the conservative justices would have given them at least a day in court. And so it says the statements complained. Basic what they're saying. Her statements are protected because Dominion is a public figure. It's a company. It's not a figure. It's a company. And must prove that Mrs. Powell acted with malice. This is impossible. She literally accused the company of working with Hugo Chavez's ghost to fix the election. This is impossible because Ms. Powell's lawyers explained her statements were based on sworn affidavits, blah, 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 blah. And so therefore it goes down here and it says, contrary to what the fake news is pushing, she did not claim in court that no reasonable person could believe her claims. The press is using twisted legalese and manipulating the legal standard to confuse the issue they have done before in other cases. So basically what they're saying here is that very simple phrase, I read you, means the exact opposite of what I said. Right? So you can see what she's doing here, right? You can see what she's doing. She is very much coming out and saying, look, I can't be sued because what I said was so fantastical, so ridiculous, that no reasonable person would believe it. And so therefore, you might as well, you can't say that I hurt your company because no one believed what I said, and because no one believed what I said, it won't hurt your company's bottom line going forward. But she knows that makes her out to be a sellout to the MAGA movement, to the election conspiracy theorists. And so she has to say something entirely different when not in the courtroom. And it's very fascinating. It's sort of actually like how Trump lawyers had to act during the election or the post-election period, where in public, all of the rhetoric was about all of this evidence they had proving that Trump was the rightful winner. But whenever they got into a courtroom, all they could say was, we have no evidence as of yet. We have no proof as of yet. Because if you lie in a courtroom, that's a crime. Again, to some degree, you can lie in public. She's getting in trouble because she's slandering. But if she was more vague and say, I have proof the election was stolen, it's unlikely she would face any legal consequences for that action. She's facing these consequences because she specifically defamed a company, or if she did it to an individual, and that person is claiming financial damages. So that's just the some of the things that have happened today. Now, I do want to wrap up because normally we go to about 10:30. I'm a little tired tonight, so I do want to give it a bit of an early night and let this one go. But before I go, I want to share a few things. One, if you haven't yet, please check out the Discord. I dropped the link earlier. But it helps. It's a great place to talk about the YouTube channel and all the fun things we're doing there. Do check that out. Also, if you haven't yet, follow me on Twitter. It's a good place, again, to see some of my thoughts, even on things that maybe aren't big enough to make a video on. If you want to support the channel, there's a variety of ways you can do so. Many of you have already done it tonight through generous super chats and things like that. But you can also support the channel through donations at PayPal. You can become a channel member here on YouTube. You can join up at Patreon and all these sorts of things. That's a great way to help support the channel. But one of the biggest things you guys can do is just watch the videos. Again, as I noted earlier in the stream, whether it's me or whether it's bigger channels like Secular Talk, Kyle Kalinske, this is a time where viewership is down and subscriber growth is down. It's probably a mixture of lower interest in general in politics, but it might also have a connection to some potential algorithmic changes. So if you can help creators like myself, one of the things you can do is just make sure to check the videos out when they get posted, or, if at the end of the day, you can go and just give the videos a watch. It is something you can do that really helps the channel. Again, the way it works here on YouTube basically is it's like momentum based. So if I post a video and a bunch of people check it out soon after posting, then YouTube takes that as a sign of confidence of the video's quality and will therefore share it with a bunch of people in turn, right? For instance, just like in honesty, I posted this video earlier today. Very few people checked it out and in the first few minutes, and as a result, it got very few views. Like this video, just as an example, even though the video is fairly in line with the content I normally make. So things are very momentum based. And so that's one of the biggest things you can do to support the channel is watch the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, click the subscribe button. And if you haven't clicked the bell yet, do be sure to click that. Because if you do, you'll get notifications about my content. And that lets you know when I've posted them. So basically, that's it for tonight. This has been really great. Thank you so much for stopping by. I always appreciate that. A bunch of folks are happy to spend their Wednesday nights with me. It means a great deal. So guys, I will see you next Wednesday. And with videos between now and then, multiple times a day. So guys, have a good one. Thanks so much. Also, look, if you have people who enjoy progressive content, share the videos with them. That's actually really helpful as well. Because if YouTube isn't organically sharing them, word of mouth often really helps. So if you have a friend that likes this sort of political content, let them know about the channel. A lot of you found me through things like that. Other creators talking about it. And that's how a lot of some of my biggest fans found me. The algorithm would have never shown them to me. So keep that in mind as well. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you next time.